Tonight, at least 30 people killed following a magnitude 7.6 earthquake in central Japan. The South Korean opposition leader rushed to hospital after being stabbed in the neck. Wild weather tracking north, a deluge of rain shifts towards Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast.
Hi everyone, Dave Warner here. Unfortunately, this is my last resort to do this.
And David Warner issues a plea to have his baggy greens returned before his final test. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Kamin Gock. At least 30 people have been killed after a powerful earthquake struck central North Japan. Thousands of rescuers, including the Japanese military, have been deployed, searching for survivors under the rubble. And authorities are warning the danger isn't over yet.
Fear and panic. Strong earthquake hits central Japan just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This newsroom, journalists hide under their desks while a cameraman carries on filming. People are trapped under the rubble. Buildings have collapsed. Some areas have been completely wiped out. In Ishikawa, the epicentre of the quake, officials were overwhelmed by the number of people calling for help. The force of the magnitude 7.6 quake was felt in this underground car park.
Are you okay? Are you all right?
Foreigners and tourists caught up in the chaos.
It is quite scary, definitely. You know, when you hear about earthquakes in Japan, you wouldn't expect one to actually experience one.
People crouched and took cover in train stations. The shrines shocked worshippers had a narrow escape. Japan is used to earthquakes on this scale, but there hasn't been one this strong since the devastating 2011 quake and tsunami, which killed more than 18,000 people. There are fewer casualties from this earthquake, but there's still great concern. Thousands have been left without power, with fires tearing through buildings. Many were shopping when the earthquake struck. Authorities have warned that more aftershocks could follow. Tremors were felt hundreds of kilometres away here in the capital. Across the country, thousands spent the night in shelters, worried about what may be coming next. Nuclear power plants have all reported that the situation is normal, but for a country that's been ravaged by earthquakes many times before, people here are not taking any chances. Residents were ordered to leave for higher ground as tsunami alerts were issued. They were later downgraded, but people have been warned not to return to their homes, with more potentially dangerous waves expected. Japan's meteorological agency has warned of the risk of landslides. Roads have already been cut off and emergency services are battling to reach disaster zones. The Japanese military has been deployed, the government promising to get help to where it's needed as soon as it can. Jake Sturmer, ABC News, Tokyo.
An Australian serving with the Israeli army has been killed while fighting inside Gaza. The 32-year-old reservist was called up for duty after the October 7 attack and is the first known Australian to die inside Gaza since the war started.
Lior Sivan didn't choose a career in Israel's military but was called up for duty on October 7. After weeks inside Gaza, the combat officer was killed when the tank he was captaining came under Hamas attack.
My son, without hesitation, came out to shoot at the terrorist, but it was an ambush. He saved 7 of his soldiers by this heroic act.
Yo, dude!
Yeah, dude!
The mechanical engineer was a father of 1 with another child due next week. At his funeral, friends and his wife spoke of Lior's sense of humour and warm personality.
I can't imagine our lives without you. but I promise to do everything to be a family that still loves life and laughs. Lior, you were a person who drew people to you like a magnet, whether it was because of your impressive height and you being so handsome, or whether it was because of your captivating personality, charisma, and the self-confidence that you radiated.
Lior Sivan was born in Melbourne and moved to Israel as a young child. His father says his son wasn't a fighter, but wanted to protect Israel's survival.
And even though my son loved life, creation, nature, and peace, he saw as a very important task to defend the country and the people.
Lior is buried next to two other Israeli soldiers who've also died since October 7. On his grave, a memorial stone reads, "We will remember and we will win." Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs has offered its condolences to Captain Sivan's family. Alison Horn, ABC News, Bet Shemesh in Israel.
South Korea's opposition leader has been stabbed in the neck at a news conference in the southern port city of Busan. Lee Jae-myung was attacked by an unidentified man who approached him asking for an autograph. The suspect was apprehended at the scene. Mr. Lee was treated in hospital, but officials say his injuries are not life-threatening. Now, joining me now is Professor Bronwyn Dalton from University of Technology, Sydney, and is a former director of the National Korean Studies Centre. Bronwyn, thank you for your time. Do we know what the motive behind this attack?
No, there's been no release of any information about the attacker to date, but there has been quite a few incidents of political violence over the last few years by far-right South Korean nationalists, and it was against the head of the left-leaning Democratic Party. So it could be a lone wolf terrorist act, but it could also be a member of a far-right group that are strong supporters of the right-wing president. A bit like the Proud Boys, if you like.
So who is Lee Jae-myung, and can you talk through his rise in politics?
He really is a self-made man. So he lived a life of poverty. He was actually a child factory worker. He didn't even attend middle school. He eventually put himself through law school at a lower-ranking university and became a human rights lawyer and worked very closely with the union movement in South Korea. Then he became successfully ran for mayor of a satellite city outside of Seoul. And then before he became opposition leader, he was the governor of Gyeonggi province.
So he narrowly lost the 2022 presidential elections, but there's been a lot of controversy around him since. Can you talk to that?
Whether or not those investigations are politically motivated, we can park that, but nevertheless, he is being investigated, but more for his activities while he was mayor of Songgon, of this satellite city. He's accused of losing over $15 million through a property scandal. And there's also a rumour, most unconfirmed, that he's transferred approximately $8 million to North Korea. So he's denied all of those accusations and said they're politically motivated, but the government is still pursuing him and investigating those matters.
And in 2022, that was the closest presidential race in the country's history. What were Mr. Lee's next moves in politics?
So he's remained the leader of the Democratic Party, and he's also a lawmaker serving in the Korean Congress. Incidentally, just to reinforce this history of political violence, in that year, his campaign manager was also attacked with a hammer, and he was the previous head of the left-leaning Democratic Party. His name was Song Yong-gu.
Yeah, you've touched on that politically motivated violence, and just last year there was a series of stabbing rampages in South Korea. Why has there been a rise in these kind of attacks?
Well, they have done some recent surveys where there is very low life satisfaction. Only 34% in a recent survey said South Koreans are happy with their lives. There's high youth unemployment and, like many places in the world, big issues with cost of living pressures. Also, it's an ageing population. It's the lowest birth rate in the world. Whether this compounds some sort of social malaise, I'm not sure, but you're correct. Knife crime is on the rise in South Korea.
And the South Korean government has said that it would introduce harsher punishments and increase police after those incidents last year. Can we expect to see that ramp up now, given a politician has been the victim of an attack, albeit the opposition leader?
Yes, and what we would think would be ramped up is more security for the presidential candidates.
Bronwyn Dalton, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Heavy rainfall, which has been causing havoc to southeast Queensland, is now tracking north. A deluge has been pummelling the region from Maryborough to the northern rivers of New South Wales. The worst of the conditions are now shifting towards Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. It will give a much-needed reprieve for some residents to clean up after Christmas storms began a stretch of wild weather. A flood watch is now in place for isolated minor to moderate flooding along the Brisbane River. And as Ariana Levy reports, the government has announced a boost to financial support for communities impacted by the severe weather.
Well, more recovery support has been announced by the Federal Disaster Recovery Fund assistance for primary producers and small businesses that need in the regions of the southeast that have been impacted by the severe wet weather we've seen over the last few days. Now, the areas of concern today include Rainbow Beach and Gympie up on the Sunshine Coast, all the way down through to Brisbane and the Gold Coast. It really is a strip along the southeast. In particular, state emergency services are focused on the scenic rim region along the Gold Coast. The main concern is that region has been battered by severe thunderstorms over the last few days, including when a tornado ripped through the region on Christmas Day, leaving more than 12,000 customers still without power. Now, the Bureau of Meteorology has advised that the latest figures of possible rainfall totals could include up to 250 millimetres within a 6-hour period today, as well as up to 350 millimetres within a 24-hour period. Now, the main concern there is for rivers and catchments in those areas that are prone to quick rises with the inundation of water. We have heard from Queensland Fire and Rescue that say that there are hundreds of boots on the ground currently here in Queensland, but more personnel are expected in the coming days.
Fire and emergency service crews remain very active across both response and recovery in the impacted areas of southeast Queensland. We've still got over 300 personnel in addition to those on-shift personnel deployed into the area supporting those activities. The State Emergency Services received over 700 calls in the last 24-hour period.
Now, overnight, there were more than 700 call-outs for assistance for the State Emergency Service, as well as 17 swift water rescues. Thankfully, so far, there haven't been any fatalities, but authorities are warning people to be vigilant and aware, considering yesterday there were nearly 44 people that were evacuated from a campground due to those quick river rises. Now, we've heard from Senator Murray Watt today, who has explained that there are support payments available for those primary producers and small businesses that are experiencing hardship from the southeast Queensland deluge. It is on top of already some pretty significant one-off payments for people in those areas, including one-off payment of $180 for individuals and $900 for families.
This support includes disaster assistance concessional loans of up to $250,000, $250,000 to repair or replace damaged buildings, plant, stock and equipment. There's also essential working capital loans of up to $100,000 available to help enable continued operations for affected businesses.
Now, the main messaging today from authorities is to avoid driving through floodwaters. Here in Queensland, there's the saying, if it's flooded, forget it. There's also major concerns that there are possibilities for landslips as well as severely damaged roads, including several road closures along the southeast. Today, authorities are also warning people to try and stay indoors if possible, as the Bureau is predicting we could see this rainfall continue into tomorrow.
Flooding has eased in northern New South Wales, but not before cutting off a number of communities and damaging roads. The impact has been greatest in the Tweed region, where the conditions have been testing the resolve of residents still recovering from severe flooding nearly 2 years ago.
Despite countless warnings from the SES, this still happens. A driver ploughs through a flooded creek near Kyogle, avoiding disaster by a matter of seconds.
The occupants of that vehicle, extremely fortunate. The footage shows very clearly what did happen as soon as they left that bridge. The bridge was washed away.
It's been a wet start to the new year in many parts of the Northern Rivers region. The heaviest falls were recorded near the Queensland border. In the 48 hours to 9 o'clock this morning, parts of the Tweed Valley received more than half a metre of rain, with the heaviest falls recorded at Numinbah and Limpenwood. Further south at Kyogle, more than 100 millimetres fell over 24 hours. The deluge led to 115 calls for assistance to the SES, including 28 flood rescues. Many of those needing help were campers in the Tweed catchment.
The situation at the campground was pretty bad, so we decided better to go home. But once we came through the town here, we had to stay here because we couldn't go anywhere.
Those in the village of Talgum were isolated by floodwater for much of the day, but by mid-afternoon conditions had eased and roads reopened. But with the catastrophic events of 2022 still painfully fresh for many locals, even minor flooding can be traumatic.
The community is reeling. Obviously, they only just got their road open out at Talgum about 6 weeks ago, after nearly 2 years of having it closed.
While more rain is expected on the state's far north coast this week, the Weather Bureau is not predicting any heavy falls. But things can change quickly, and thunderstorms are always a possibility at this time of year. Bruce McKenzie, ABC News, Lismore.
It's been revealed the pilot killed in the SeaWorld helicopter crash a year ago had traces of cocaine in his system on the day of the incident. While a scientist has told investigators the traces were so low it's unlikely to have impacted his motor skills, the Transport Safety Bureau says it's not known whether side effects of the drug, which can include fatigue, depression and inattention, affected the pilot's performance.
For those who witnessed the shocking mid-air collision, memories are still vivid.
Shock like I've never had before. It just didn't look real. It was like something out of a movie scene.
4 people were killed when the 2 SeaWorld helicopters crashed over the Gold Coast Broadwater estuary. Pilot Ashley Jenkinson, Sydney mother Vanessa Tadros and British couple Ron and Diane Hughes died. 3 others were critically injured. Now, a year on, an interim report into the crash has revealed Ashley Jenkinson had traces of cocaine in his system. A forensic pharmacologist has told air crash investigators the traces of cocaine were so low, it's unlikely the drug was taken within 24 hours of the accident and wouldn't have impaired his psychomotor skills. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau is looking into the personal and operational stress the pilot was under in the months leading up to the incident.
Humans we know are susceptible to miscalculations, to not following procedures, and they're the sorts of things that we are very keen to understand.
As part of the investigation, a 3D animation of the moments leading up to the fatal crash is being created in Germany.
So that we can see exactly what was likely to be seen or possible to be seen by both the pilots.
Sean Pringle remembers how excited the passengers were before the Joy flights and the aftermath inside the terminal.
A lot of screaming and people demanding answers, and obviously we didn't have any answers. So it was pretty horrible.
He believes more people would have died had it not been for the actions of the surviving pilot, Michael James.
The position he ended up in after the collision and then to actually get it down safely, unbelievable, incredible, superhuman.
Emergency agencies practiced a search and rescue drill near the crash scene last month as part of a review into their response.
There'd be a lot further education in relation to sort of the aviation side of things.
The ATSB will release its final report with recommendations in 6 months.
Got to get that right if we're going to have recommendations that are widely picked up, not only here on the Gold Coast, but more broadly throughout Australia.
Kirsten Webster, ABC News, Gold Coast.
An investigation is underway following the tragic death of a 16-year-old boy near Hobart overnight. Officers believe the teenager was lying on a highway when he was struck and killed by a passing vehicle.
On a stretch of the Tasman Highway, a police roadblock diverts traffic as crash investigators examine the site of an accident that happened shortly before midnight on New Year's Day.
16-year-old male had been struck by a vehicle after being found on the roadway on the highway. Tragically, he passed away.
Police believe the Berrydale teenager was lying on the road when a vehicle struck him at Orielton, about 30 kilometres northeast of Hobart. The driver stopped and called emergency services, but there was nothing they could do.
Unfortunately, it appears to be quite accidental and certainly very traumatic for all people involved, including the witnesses and also emergency services attending.
Police still don't know why the boy was lying on the side of the road late at night, but they believe he'd been travelling in a blue Mazda shortly before the incident.
It's been ascertained that he was conveyed there with a group of people who are known to him. It's unknown at this time as to why he'd got out of the vehicle and why he'd been left behind by the group.
Police have since found that vehicle and spoken to one of its occupants as they prepare a report for the coroner. The teenager's death is the first on Tasmanian roads in 2024 after 34 people lost their lives last year, including 2 motorbike riders just 5 days ago. Authorities are urging motorists to take care over the holiday season. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
Victoria's court system has been hit by a ransomware attack, which may have exposed recordings of sensitive cases. Reporter Ben Knight has the story.
On the 21st of December, court staff in Melbourne went to work and found that they were locked out of their computers. They were confronted with a message that said files have been compromised and directing them to a site on the dark web with instructions on what they needed to do, what the court system, what the government needed to do in order to recover those files. Now, we don't know what the progress of that is at the moment. That's not surprising, as you would expect. I mean, this is ransomware. This is essentially a ransom demand. But what the court system, Court Services Victoria, has been at pains to say is that this is not one of those hacks where we're talking about financial information, corporate information or users' details. But it is still quite concerning because the attack was focused on a part of the court information technology network that held audio-visual files. And the audio-visual files from court hearings and tribunal hearings that took place between the 1st of November and December 21st, late last year, which was the day that this hack was detected. Now, what that means is that we're talking about testimony, possibly, testimony that comes from some of those hearings. So these are essentially members of the public that have been brought into the court process. Some of them we know are from the county court system. We know that at least 2 of those cases involve historical cases of child sexual abuse. Other cases are from the Supreme Court Criminal Network, from the Appeals Court, and concerningly also one possible case from the Children's Court in Victoria. So those are the files that have been compromised, that have essentially been stolen. The Deputy Premier, Ben Carroll, was out and about today and really was at pains to try and reassure people that that the court system would be able to continue.
Look, I understand court operations have not been affected. I understand that this attack has been essentially confined and all court cases, all hearings, all evidence, all procedure is thoroughly protected, and we're very confident that we'll get to the bottom of it.
So, Ben, who is thought to be behind the attack?
Look, we've spoken with experts in cybersecurity who took a look at some screenshots of those messages that confronted court staff when the hack first took place. The feeling is that this is Russian hackers using a piece of essentially commercial technology, a piece of commercial ransomware called Keylin, which has been developed. It's given to hacker groups. Hacker groups try to find their way into organisations exactly like this in phishing attacks and the like, and if there is any money to be made out of it, then there's a payoff back to the developer of the software. But look, there's a lot that we don't know about this at the moment, as you would expect. If it's a ransom negotiation, so whatever is going on at the moment probably won't become public for some time, but you would imagine that there is a very strong desire to prevent some of this material from ever making it into the public domain, in the way that, for example, the user details of Optus customers made their way into the public domain, and the impacts of that are still being felt.
So what happens next?
Well, what happens next is going to happen, I would say, behind closed doors. But what we can say is that the court system will resume. So because this is essentially recordings, audio-visual archives that relate to specific cases, and none of the other aspects of the court network, we're told, have been affected. So the court system essentially is able to open up for the beginning of the court year in January as normal. We're told that so far this hack doesn't affect any ongoing cases, at least not that anyone is aware of yet. And of course, as we know, there's a massive backlog of cases in the court system here in Victoria, as there is in other parts of the country, are still dealing with the hold-ups during COVID. So any hold-up would be not great, but we are told that when the court system opens up for the new year in January, it will resume as normal.
Home ownership is now even more out of reach for many Australians, with double-digit price surges in several states for 2023. Experts are predicting interest rates relief this year, but also more price pain for first home buyers.
The property market boomed last year, even though interest rates were at a 13-year high.
I've been in real estate nearly 40 years and I haven't seen anything like this before. It's quite unusual.
The real estate agent wants $1.4 million for this two-bedroom flat, and it might just get that thanks to growing interest from cashed-up investors.
There's a shortage of properties on the market, and therefore, because of the higher demand, the prices have been rising.
The numbers for 2023 are now in, and the rises for the year ended at more than 8% across Australia. That has pushed up the price of the average home to around $750,000. Perth, Brisbane and Sydney jumped the most, while Adelaide, Melbourne and Canberra rose as well. Hobart and Darwin were the only capitals where prices dropped.
I would imagine 2024 is going to start with a slowdown at the high end of the market in particular.
But this trend might be short-lived.
Once we get a stronger signal that a cash rate cut is on the horizon or the cash rate actually goes down, that would start to stimulate more demand.
Our base case is no more rate rises in Australia, and we expect the first rate cut to start in September.
The average home now costs more than 8 times the standard annual income.
So it's a pretty difficult time for people trying to get into the housing market currently.
Saving up for a deposit is also difficult when rents keep going up. Nationally, they soared by more than 8% in 2023, which was adding to even bigger increases in the previous 2 years. Apartment rents have been going up the most.
Unless there's a substantial change in household composition or a dramatic drop-off in overseas migration, you would expect that rental demand to stay very high.
Making this year likely another tough one for low-income households and a good one for cashed-up investors. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
A quick look at the weather around the capital cities for tomorrow, and Brisbane and Sydney will be partly cloudy. Canberra and Melbourne, showers with a possible storm. Hobart, a shower or two. Adelaide will be cloudy. Perth, mostly sunny. And Darwin is expecting a shower or two with a possible storm and a top of 34 degrees. Here are the top stories on ABC News. At least 30 people have been killed following a magnitude 7.6 earthquake in Japan. Hundreds of buildings have collapsed or burnt down, while essential services are cut off in parts of the country. Authorities say power and water outages are complicating rescue and recovery efforts. South Korea's opposition party leader has been stabbed at a news conference in the southern port city of Busan. Lee Jae-myung was stabbed on the left side of his neck by an unidentified man who was then arrested at the scene. Mr. Lee was transported to a hospital after the attack. Officials say his injuries are not life-threatening. Severe weather warnings are still in place for southeast Queensland, while warnings have been cancelled for northern New South Wales. Parts of the region in New South Wales have received hundreds of millimetres of rain over the past 2 days, causing flash flooding. The Bureau of Meteorology says storms off the coast of southeast Queensland are providing significant risk should winds sweep them south. And Australia's top-ranked woman, Arina Rodionova, has upset former Australian Open champion Sophia Kenin to reach the last 16 at the Brisbane International. The 34-year-old needed nearly 2.5 hours to secure the straight sets victory, 7-5 and 7-6. 35 emergency response beacons will be installed at unpatrolled beaches across New South Wales, with 10 to be activated early this year. It comes after a deadly holiday period with 7 people drowning on the state's beaches in the past month alone. Stephen Pearce is the Chief Executive Officer of Surf Lifesaving New South Wales. He says it's hoped the new beacons will make a difference.
Essentially, these are a new piece of technology that we're rolling out at unpatrolled locations. And it's in its essence, it's a camera and speaker on a large pole that's solar powered with an automatic touch button alert. So if someone sees someone in distress, whether it be in the water or on the beach, they just run up, hit the button, it automatically activates the camera. Our operators back at our state control centre will talk to the person, get the details of the incident, pan the camera around, and then respond to the nearest available emergency resources that's required for that particular incident.
And so how long has this technology been around?
Yeah, look, we started rolling the program out around 4 years ago, and we have around 32 in the field at the moment at black spot locations or unpatrolled locations. And over the next 4 years, we've been funded by the Min's government to roll out another 35. So this is like a really great use of technology, and essentially gives us some surveillance and eyes in locations where we just don't normally have lifesavers or lifeguards.
So you're essentially doubling the number of beaches which will have this technology. Is there a criteria to determine which beaches get it?
Yeah, look, broadly the criteria is anywhere where there's been either one or more drownings or multiple serious incidents where we've had to respond to. So, you know, we've made the decision to put these emergency response beacons there, and that allows anyone that they do see someone in distress to be able to hit these devices. And for example, we have them in a lot of black spot rock fishing locations where we've had multiple rock fishing drownings, and these have proven to be really life-saving some of those locations.
And so how do you prevent false alarms or people misusing these beacons?
Look, you know, there's full signage all around the device itself, but inevitably there's always either going to be someone maliciously activating or accidentally activating it. But the beauty is, you know, we've got our operators there monitoring them all the time. They can just activate the camera, they can see whether it's an actual incident or not, and also just talk to that person that's nearby. So, you know, again, we're always going to have, I guess, some blips on the radar, but, you know, since we've had these in the field, we've had just under around 110 activations. And out of those 110, 40 of those have been for serious incidents.
And I believe one was activated actually today.
Yeah, it's just coincidence leading into this interview that around 4 o'clock, the emergency response beacon up at the ruins up near Byron Bay was activated. Was activated by a person on the beach running up with the reports that there was 2 swimmers missing in the water. Because of that activation, we were able to respond immediately. Our nearby lifeguards and other emergency services, they got down there on scene. Fortunately, they found the 2 people, but they had to be treated and reviewed just for their safety and health and welfare. But again, it's just another great example that up at Byron Bay, where we know we get an enormous amount of people. The ruins is one location that isn't patrolled, but we do have this surveillance cameras and this technology to assist those lifeguards up there.
So how do people know if an ERB is at their beach? Obviously there's signage, but is there anywhere else they can look for it?
Yeah, most certainly. They can go onto the Surf Lifesaving New South Wales website and they can just type in emergency response beacon and that'll show the locations as to where these beacons are. When you come down to the beach, they're extremely visible, a lot of signage around them. You'll be able to see the big solar panels on there and the camera in itself. But again, from all accounts, these have been incredibly successful. We're really excited to be rolling out another 35 and then we'll assess that again to see whether we need any more after that period.
And you touched on how the camera is instantaneous, but how long is a typical response time, I guess, if it's deemed that you need to send crews out?
Yeah, so as soon as that button's activated, a message is automatically sent to nearby lifeguards or lifesavers at other beaches, and then it obviously comes back into our control operations centre. So we immediately start rolling resources there straight away. And until we can ascertain whether it's an actual incident or an accidental activation, those resources will keep on responding. So if you can imagine, compared to, say, a 000 call, this is a lot quicker than dialing the 000 call, but we're always saying, please still ring 000 once you activate that alarm. But again, it's just that immediate and rapid response, and that's the beauty of these devices.
And it's been an awful summer already with deaths along the waterways across the country. Can you just reiterate best practice and the safest way to go to the beach?
Yeah, like as you said, we've had 7 drownings since Christmas Day along the coast, and that's absolutely terrible. So again, we've got still a big, long, hot, dry summer ahead of us. We're always going to be advocating to go to a patrolled location anywhere where you see those red and yellow flags and where you see the lifeguards and lifesavers on duty. But we do know that that the coastline is bulging with visitors at the moment, so people will go to unpatrolled locations. So if you do elect to go to an unpatrolled location, just 2 things, really vital things you need to remember. If you go there and you see someone in distress, please ensure you ring 000 in the first instance, and that allows us to respond nearby lifesavers and lifeguards there. But importantly, if you make a decision to go into the water to assist that person, it's so inherently important that you take a flotation device, anything that can keep you and that person afloat until we can get our lifeguards and lifesavers there. And that could be a boogie board, it could be a pool tube, it could be an esky, it could be a soccer ball, anything to keep you afloat. Last year, really tragically, we saw 8 people lose their lives because they went into the water to try and assist other people and unfortunately lost their lives in doing so.
While tourism generally dries up during the Northern Territory's wet season, the fishing industry brings an unexpected boom to local businesses. A government-run competition is attracting amateur and professional anglers from near and far, all vying for the big prize, the $1 million barramundi.
For most anglers, a well-caught fish is enough of a reward.
Okay, well, guess it's back on then.
But a handful of lucky top-end fishos are reeling in above the market price.
Oh, he's seen a tag! He's got a tag! Oh my god, we have to see what season it is.
A red tag making this barra worth $10,000.
Season 9! Yes! The joy of catching one, it's just, you can't compare. We say it like every single season, this is the best comp ever.
Lauren is one of the winners in this season of the $1 Million Fish competition, a tourism initiative from the NT government. At the start of each wet season, 100 tagged barramundi are released into top-end waters, each worth $10,000, with $1 million fish released alongside them. In the 8 years the competition has been running, the $1 million fish has never been caught, but anglers have been guaranteed that will change this year.
We can narrow the scope to make sure that somebody will absolutely be a $1 million winner this year.
The competition is exhilarating for both anglers and businesses alike, last season bringing in $23 million from interstate alone.
It's done wonders for my brother's business, it's done wonders for the rest of the fishing industry, the amount of money that gets spent in all the stores.
Stirred everybody right up, got everyone completely frothing on catching barra, and just added this little element in there that really got people sort of motivated.
And while some fishers will be happy with just one tag, Lauren won't let up until the season is done.
Plan is to get another tag, preferably to get the $1 million.
So while you might have some fierce competition, now is the perfect time to throw a line in the water. You might just win big. Daniel Litchens, ABC News, Darwin.
Australia's cricket captain Pat Cummins says he has some worries about the future of Test cricket on the eve of the third and final Test against Pakistan. National Sport reporter David Mark is at the SCG.
The news that South Africa is sending a second string team to New Zealand to play 2 Tests, while its stars stay at home to play a T20 series, has sent shockwaves through the cricketing community. Both Australian openers, David Warner and Usman Khawaja, say they're concerned about the future of the game and the amount of money for T20 cricket at the expense of Tests. Australian captain Pat Cummins says he also has concerns.
Again, every summer feels bigger than the last here in Australia, but obviously going overseas it's not the case. So in some regards, yeah, I'm a little bit worried at times.
Cummins has another concern closer to home as his team seeks to get a 3-0 whitewash of its Test series against Pakistan in what will be David Warner's 112th and last Test. Pakistan's captain Shan Masood says his team has plenty to play for.
At least we have the lessons in front of us. At least we've put ourselves in those positions where from there we can dominate games. So now it's about learning from them, not repeating mistakes or trying not to repeat mistakes. And hopefully if we can put in efforts like that, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of Test wins in the future. But again, it's about learning from the mistakes and making sure that when you play quality sides, you can't be making those mistakes.
There was some bitter news for David Warner, who's playing his 112th and last Test here at the SCG. He posted a video on social media saying his bag had been stolen, which contained his precious baggy green, as well as some presents for his children.
Inside this backpack was my baggy greens. It's sentimental to me. It's something that I would love to have back in my hands walking out there come this week.
Sydney's fickle weather, which has played havoc with this Test over the past few years, could yet have a part to play in this Test. But the good news is that the forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology is mainly good, with only the chance of a few brief showers later in the week.
In tennis, Australia's top-ranked woman, Arina Rodionova, has upset former Grand Slam champion Sofia Kenin at the Brisbane International. The 34-year-old needed nearly 2.5 hours to outlast the world number 37 Kenin, securing the win in straight sets 7-5, 7-6. The Australian needed a wild card to enter the tournament, but has now powered through to the round of 16. And Australia will face either Serbia or the Czech Republic in tomorrow's United Cup quarter-final. Alex de Minaur helped Australia upset the US last night when he beat Taylor Fritz in straight sets. World number 5, Jessica Pegula, levelled the tie with a win over Ayla Tomljanovic before Matt Ebden and Storm Hunter overcame Pegula and Rajiv Ram 6-3, 6-1. And a quick look at the weather around the capital cities for tomorrow. Brisbane and Sydney, partly cloudy. Canberra and Melbourne, it'll be showers with a possible storm. Hobart, a shower or two. Adelaide will be cloudy. Perth, mostly sunny. And Darwin is expecting a shower or two with a possible storm and a top of 34 degrees. That's ABC News for now. I'm Kamin Gock. Stay with us. If You're Listening is up next.
In March 2022, a senior software engineer at a gaming company in